Welcome to AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas, the site of what I think Dan and I have both agreed on was the greatest football game that either of the two of us have ever seen. Brendan Dzwierzynski, Dan Lucero here with you from Jerry World in Arlington, the site of the Kansas State Wildcats thrilling overtime win in the Big 12 championship game over the TCU Horned Frogs by a margin of 31-28. Topeka's own Ty Zentner with the game-winning field goal in overtime. We had drama, we had comebacks, we had all-time individual performances. But Dan, at the very end, it came down to Joe Klanderman's defense, Deuce Vaughn going crazy, and then Ty Zentner with the game winner.
Yeah, I don't even know where you begin with this one. There's just so much in this football game, so many twists and turns that threatened to give us whiplash, and that was just midway through the third quarter. A game that saw Kansas State appear to have a lot of opportunities to take control of the game, but TCU's Max Duggan, one of the best players in the country this year, putting the Horned Frogs on his back in the fourth quarter, leading the game-tying touchdown drive. But TCU stonewalled in overtime because they didn't give the ball to Max Duggan. 3rd and goal from inside the 1-yard line. 2 plays to get half a yard and put K-State in a position where they have to score a touchdown to keep the game going, and they couldn't get it. Kendre Miller was stuffed both times by the stellar Kansas State defense. That front came up huge there inside the goal line, and then Kansas State knew that Ty Zentner just needed a good look at it. He got it from 31 yards, put it through, and for only the 4th time in school history, Kansas State is a conference champion.
And for the first time with Chris Kleiman as the head coach. Truly an amazing game. We'll get to all of the various controversial elements of it, and boy, were there plenty of them. Things that worked against TCU potentially at the end, but things that worked against K-State during the game as well. There was an obvious safety in this game, right at the end zone, right in front of us here at AT&T Stadium, that was taken off the board. We don't know why. We have no idea why it was taken off the board. But at the very end of the game, and we'll talk about Deuce Vaughn, who is the most outstanding player of the championship game in a moment, but Joe Klanderman's defense at the very last moment came up with the biggest play of the entire game. There was a controversial stop on 3rd and goal from inside the 1-yard line. Did he get in? Did they not? The referees didn't even go to the booth to review it, but then they got in the backfield. The linebacking core for K-State was in the backfield before Kendre Miller even had taken the handoff from Max Duggan on 4th down. So you can say whatever you want about spots and controversy and all of that, but when you had hat on a hat and needed to make a play at the most important part of the game, it was the K-State front 7 that stepped up.
Well, all year long, but especially in the second half of this season, we've talked about Joe Klanderman's defense making necessary adjustments. They had been a tremendous second half defense all season long. And admittedly, that first drive for TCU, they walk it down the field and they score a touchdown, and you think, oh boy, this could be a long day. Quentin Johnston looks spry. He looks as healthy as he's looked in a while. This could be a long day for that Kansas State defense, but they made immediate adjustments. They hold that offense to 28 points in regulation and then keep them out of that end zone in the overtime. That is a tremendous job by this Kansas State defense. They were good at all levels. They weathered the loss of Echo Boydo. That felt like it was going to be hugely impactful with Boydo going out due to injury in the first half. Jacob Parrish, the true freshman, made some plays. He has some other guys. Keenan Garber is holding his own there, cornerback, against some of these freak wide receivers TCU has. He was playing wide receiver in practice 3 weeks ago.
He 3 weeks as a defensive back, and he comes up with multiple big plays in this game, both special teams and on defense.
It's a testament to coaching, and I'll tell you this, for Joe Klanderman, that might not be a name that outside of Kansas State circles is really well known. I think that changes starting now. He and this defense did such a tremendous job, particularly down the stretch for Kansas State, and they made enough plays, and they looked for a moment when they took an 11-point lead in the fourth quarter. It looked like they had an opportunity to win this thing outright, and they had TCU behind the sticks in a lot of situations. But that's where you have to take your cap off to Max Duggan. I mean, the Heisman conversation has excluded Max Duggan all season long. And if you watch this game, you know what a big mistake that is. That is a special talent, and he put his team on his back in a game-winning touchdown drive. If not for Duggan and his will and his desire to keep TCU in the game, Kansas State wins this one in regulation and maybe handily.
Yes, they absolutely do. That was one of the greatest individual performances that I have ever seen, ever. And it came in a loss of all things. I mean, just truly special stuff from Max Duggan in this one to get them into that position late in the game. And just as an illustration of how wacky this game was, really from beginning to end, or at least second quarter onward, the only reason K-State even allowed TCU back into the game was a special teams error of all things, a muffed punt that set TCU up just outside the red zone. They were able to punch it in just 3 plays later. So we had pretty much everything in this game. Julius Brents, I thought, played really well defensively, had a couple of PI penalties, but
he's going up against maybe the best wide receiver in the country, Quentin Johnston.
Must be a top 10 pick.
And he made a big play late in the game on him. He held his own. I mean, and that's
end zone interception as well.
Yeah, had the end zone pick on the underthrown fade that was big on the first play of the fourth quarter when it looked like TCU was going to take a lead after K-State had that 21-10 lead. TCU had battled back, scored after the drop punt, and then they looked like they were driving to score early in the fourth quarter. Julius Brents with the interception gave as good as he got, and I think in a matchup with a guy like Quentin Johnston, that's the best you can ask for. That's tremendous leadership from the veteran Julius Brents, who's been there when K-State's needed him all season long.
Let's go to the offense. Let's go to some of the individual performances for K-State. We'll start with Deuce Vaughn, who not only won Most Outstanding Player, and for the sake of transparency, both myself and Dan voted for him as Most Outstanding Player on the K-State side in this game. He had one of the best K-State highlights of the entire season. He put a TCU safety on skates. He put him in the torture chamber with an incredible 44-yard touchdown run.
We heard him call for help from like the National Guard, like all the way up in the press box. That was as bad a posterization. It was like Allen Iverson putting a dude on the deck, as somebody said in my Twitter mentions earlier today.
You don't see broken ankles like that in football. Maybe a great basketball crossover, certainly not in football. But again, he had been held in check for a lot of the first half. First 2 drives, K-State had 9 plays for 17 yards, including multiple touches for Deuce. But you get into the second half, and he was breaking off big runs. He was extending for first downs. Biggest players, biggest moments, and he had the biggest game.
That's what you look for from your stars. And all year long, Kansas State has looked to Deuce Vaughn to spark that fire and keep them going and take the body blows, but deliver them as well, so that by the time the third and the fourth quarter rolls around, that running game really gets to clicking. And again, that is what you saw from Kansas State. They needed that big play threat. Malik Knowles went out. Don't know the severity of that injury or even the nature of that injury, but he went out after that 40-yard run he had in the second quarter. It was obvious he wasn't going to be able to continue playing. He was just about inconsolable on the sideline. That felt like that was going to be a really hard loss for Kansas State to overcome. But it's nice to have multiple big play threats, isn't it? And Deuce Vaughn, boy, he is exactly that. Always has been for this Kansas State team. A well-deserved Most Outstanding Player of the Big 12 championship game.
Then you throw in another performance that I feel like it's important to bring up. Will Howard, who was your backup quarterback and had been, frankly, reviled by a lot of people coming into this year. He's played so well. He had an argument to make it to an all Big 12 team postseason this year. He doesn't have his best game by any means. I think that's fair to say. 18 to 32, 199 yards, 2 touchdowns.
Ran for one as well.
Ran for a score as well. In total, 8 rushes for -3 yards, because of the sacks and all that. Did take a 12-yard sack at one point. But again, in big moments, he came up with big plays. The last touchdown pass he threw was just a dime in the back of the end zone on the north side of the stadium here, the end zone that's right in front of us at AT&T Stadium. It maybe wasn't his best game, but again, you needed a couple very important drives. He kept his cool, he kept his poise, and in a game like this where Deuce Vaughn was going off, that's frankly all you needed, and he provided that.
Did he make some big-time throws? You bet. Did he make any killer mistakes? No, he did not. There was the one big sack he took that cost K-State points that drove him out of field goal range. I don't think there was anything Will Howard could have done about that because he was dropping back so far, and the rush was on him immediately. But, man, that was a terrific performance, a poised performance. That's what's impressed me about Will Howard all year long, just how poised he's been from the jump. When he took over, he was ready to take over, and he played brilliant football down the stretch.
The point about Will Howard and a couple other guys too, RJ Garcia is one who had a touchdown catch in this game. He's only had, 2 or 3 catches the entire season?
And you ain't got to lie if you didn't know who he was coming into this game. That was not a name that anybody but the diehardest of K-State fans was really aware of.
But one of those people was Chris Klieman. And this game was a great example of when the coaches at K-State tell you to pay attention to someone, you better be paying attention to someone. Will Howard, you mentioned poise throughout this game. We had heard all year leading up, he was playing better football. He was getting more comfortable with things. He was asked to play in a lot of tough situations this year. He looked fantastic. RJ Garcia, another guy, had been talked up all year by the coaching staff, comes up in a big moment here. And you mentioned it earlier, talking about the coaching with the defensive stand at the end of the game. This was, I think, a tremendously called game by Chris Klieman, Colin Klein, and the entire staff.
Yeah, Colin Klein grew by leaps and bounds as a play caller as this season went along. It wasn't smooth. It wasn't A+ every single game. I thought there were some games where maybe the play calling struggled a little bit. You go back to the Tulane game early in the season for the best example of that. But that's somebody learning and growing on the job, and who clearly has a knack for putting his players in good positions and making them feel comfortable. Will Howard doesn't play like this, coming in as the backup for Adrian Martinez all season long, if he doesn't have a complete comfort level with what the offense is and what his role is in it and what he's going to be asked to do on a game in, game out basis, that is a testament to coaching. This is a extremely well-coached football teams. They don't make a ton of big mistakes. They don't take a ton of dumb penalties. They don't miss a ton of tackles on a regular basis. They are where they need to be. They are as prepared as they need to be. They make good adjustments in game. It's a terrifically well-coached team. One of the many reasons they're celebrating down on the field at AT&T Stadium right now.
And the cheers are still coming in from the K-State faithful who have hung around of deuce all over the field. While we're talking about coaching, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about Sonny Dykes at the end of the game. Coach of the year in the Big 12, understandably so. They were 12-0 coming in.
Unanimous coach of the year.
Unanimous coach of the year, exactly. How in the world do you take the ball out of Max Duggan's hands at the end of the game? Because I don't think the stats really indicate the kind of effort that Duggan put into this game. 50% completion. He's 18-36, 251 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick, 15 carries for 110 yards. He got you to overtime. He got you down to the 1 yard line. How do you then twice on 3rd and 4th down inside the 1 take the ball out of his hands? I just cannot fathom it after the game he had.
The only explanation that will hold any water is if they felt that he was completely out of gas, because on that tying touchdown drive, it looked like he needed oxygen or an IV or like a golf cart ride back to the sideline. He was so out of gas. That's the only explanation that will hold any water for me, for sure. But I'll tell you what, that's going to be something Sonny Dykes going to have to answer for in his post-game press conference here in just a few minutes.
And it's certainly going to have to answer to as well if TCU ends up not making it to the college football playoff. I'm putting them in because this performance was enough for me to say a loss, I don't care. They should still be in.
Yes. I mean, they were undefeated regular season conference champions of a very good league. They're only lost by 3 points in overtime to a top 10 team on a neutral site. To me, yes, that is a better resume than whatever you can tell me about Ohio State and whatever you can tell me about Alabama. TCU belongs in the college football playoff. They are a great, great team, and that's what should make it feel even better, taste even better for K-State fans tonight, that they beat that great team here on a neutral site and took home the conference championship.
Let's get to our final thoughts about this one, including for you, the fact that you called this final score.
Yes, I did. If you listen to 580 Sports Talk on Friday, a very handsome half of the 580 Sports Talk, not that both halves aren't handsome, mind you, but a very handsome half that walks and talks and looks a lot like me, predicted a 31-28 final score with Ty Zentner making the field goal. It was a little poetic for K-State in that way because one of the things that hurt them in the first meeting was the fact that they had some empty drives where Chris Tennant missed a couple of field goals. K-State made the kicker switch not long after that and went with Ty Zentner full time, and he was dead solid, perfect down the stretch. Didn't miss a kick when he took over the kicking job. And Kansas State, after they got the defensive stop, they felt very comfortable. Let's get Ty Zentner a chip shot, and let's go win this thing. And that's exactly what they did. Faith in your players, the ability to make a tough decision, the know-how when to pull that trigger. Again, just another testament just how well coached this team is. And now they've got the championship of the Big 12 to prove it.
And they will go to the Sugar Bowl as well, possibly against that Alabama team that we just mentioned. Final thing for me, I said it on 580 Sports Talk this week. This team has improved and just changed in general a lot since the first meeting. And that trust in the players stands out so much. The ability to say, hey, look, we like Chris Tennant. We have to make a switch. It is not working. We're going to go with Ty Zentner, who was the punter. He wasn't even the place kicker at the time. We need to make the switch here. Putting all your faith in Will Howard, who comes out, is empowered to make the right plays, to feel comfortable. He ends up having a great second half of the year. Trusting your best players in the big moments, a la Deuce Vaughn, who ends up your MOP. Just the trust in your players, the trust in your coaching staff, both Colin Klein and Joe Klanderman, as your play callers offensively and defensively. I don't think you can say enough about the performance of individuals in this game, and certainly the coaching staff as well. And we're going to talk all about this game again coming up on Monday. Jake and Fulton on Mic'd Up from noon to 3 will be talking about it. And then we will also have the audio from Friday's show when Dan correctly predicted the score, by the way, to lead off Monday's edition of 580 Sports Talk.
I'm going to go find that right now,
We're gonna,
actually.
Absolutely.
We might have to listen to it like 4 or 5 times on the drive back just to confirm.
I think we might have to. We will be on 3 until 6 on Monday. We'll be recapping this, plenty of other action from the College Football Championship weekend, the Chiefs, and so much more. But one more time, your final score from Jerry World, AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas. The Kansas State Wildcats, champions of the Big 12 in 2022, with a 31-28 win in overtime, thanks to a Ty Zentner field goal over the TCU Horned Frogs. For Dan Lucero, I'm Brendan Dzwierzynski. We'll see you coming up on